The silence was unbearable, not peace, but the kind that comes before a storm. Then she began to cry. Her voice, her real voice, broke through the still air. "Father," she whispered, "it's leaving." The candles reignited on their own, one by one. The heavy smell of sulfur filled the room, and a cold wind swept through, slamming the shutters open. The nuns screamed. Father Theophilus shouted the final words. "In the name of the Holy Trinity, I command you, leave her!" A final scream echoed through the convent. It didn't sound human. Windows shattered and the room filled with blinding light. When it faded, Anna lay motionless, tears streaming down her face. In the quiet farmlands of Iowa, 1928, stood a small brick convent surrounded by endless fields of corn. The world outside seemed peaceful, untouched by the storms of faith and fear that were about to unfold inside its walls. What happened there would become one of the most disturbing and well-documented cases of demonic possession in American history. Anna Ecklund was 30 years old when she arrived at St. Joseph's Convent. To the townspeople, she was a quiet woman from a devout Catholic family, known for attending church regularly. But behind her calm appearance, Anna carried years of torment. Those who knew her said she often refused to enter churches, grew sick at the sight of holy water, and cursed priests without reason. Her local parish priest, Father Joseph Steiger, had watched her condition worsen for years. When all prayers failed, he wrote to an experienced exorcist in Wisconsin, Father Theophilus Riesinger, a man known for facing darkness most priests refused to speak of. When Father Theophilus agreed to come, he asked for the exorcism to be done in secret, away from public eyes. So Anna was brought quietly to the convent in Erling, Iowa, where a handful of nuns would assist. None of them could imagine what awaited them. The first night seemed calm. Anna prayed softly, her voice trembling but steady. Yet, as midnight approached, the air grew heavy. The nuns later said they felt an unseen presence moving through the halls, like a breath of cold wind. When the exorcism began, Father Theophilus sprinkled holy water and began reading from the Ritual Romanum. At first, Anna's eyes rolled back, and her body went rigid. Then a deep, guttural sound came from her chest, a growl no human throat should make. Her face twisted, her expression unrecognizable. "Leave her," the priest commanded. The voice that answered was not Anna's. It spoke in languages she had never learned, Latin, German, even a dialect of Italian, and it mocked the prayers as if every word was a wound. For hours, her body contorted in ways that defied anatomy. She screamed, cursed, and spat at the crucifix. The nuns, terrified, continued to pray aloud, though some later admitted they nearly fainted from fear. When dawn finally broke, Anna collapsed into silence. Her pulse was weak. The priest stopped the ritual for the day, believing she might die if they continued. That night, as the nuns watched over her, they swore they saw her body rise an inch above the bed. Her eyes were closed, yet she whispered words none of them understood, phrases that made the candles flicker and the air vibrate. The next morning, Father Theophilus wrote in his diary, "The demons within her are cunning and cruel. They know the holy words and twist them into blasphemy. They mock God, mock me, and mock the soul they are devouring." As the days passed, the manifestations grew stronger. Anna's face would swell and sink as if something inside her was fighting to break free. She refused food, screamed at prayers, and vomited substances that no doctor could explain. At times her voice changed into that of a man, deep, mocking, cold. The priests asked who they were. The voice answered, "We are many, and she is ours." When the nuns tried to restrain her, Anna's strength became inhuman. It took 3 adults to hold her down, and even then her body thrashed as though thrown by invisible hands. By the end of the first week, everyone in the convent was exhausted. The priests fasted and prayed, their faith shaken. But Father Theophilus refused to stop. He believed the entity inside her was ancient, perhaps the same spirit that once tempted her own father, who, according to old rumors, had practiced dark rituals long before his death. The story spread quietly through the nearby town. Locals began to whisper about strange noises coming from the convent at night. Windows rattled, dogs barked endlessly, and more than one person claimed to see lights flickering behind the chapel windows when no one was inside. Inside those walls, Anna's torment continued. Her skin burned when touched with holy water. Her voice shifted between languages and laughter. Sometimes she spoke softly, as if herself again, begging for help. "Please," she said once, her eyes full of tears. "Make them stop." Then, just as quickly, her expression changed, twisted into a grin filled with hate. "She belongs to us," the voice said through her. Father Theophilus knew this was not just a test of faith. It was a war for her soul, and the battle had only begun. The second week inside St. Joseph's Convent felt endless. The air itself seemed poisoned with dread. The nuns hardly slept, and the priests lived in a state between faith and terror. Every morning began the same: a prayer, a breath, a hope that the nightmare would end. Father Theophilus grew weaker each day. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse, but he never stopped reading from the ancient texts. He believed that persistence, not power, was the only way to drive evil out. Anna's condition had worsened. Her body refused food and water. Her lips cracked from dehydration, but her strength seemed inhuman. When the priest approached her, she hissed like an animal, her face shifting from fury to sorrow in a matter of seconds. "Do you hear me?" Father Theophilus asked. "You must fight them. Pray with me." For a brief moment she looked at him with pure fear. "I can't," she whispered. "They won't let me." That night something changed. The convent's bells rang, though no one had touched them. The candles blew out, leaving only moonlight pouring through the window. And from the corner of the room came a low growl, soft at first, then building into a roar that shook the very walls. Anna's body rose from the bed, twisting midair. Her hair floated as if underwater. Every crucifix in the room trembled. "You will fail," the voice thundered, deep and layered. "She is ours. We have lived in her for years. You cannot undo what has been bound." But Father Theophilus didn't stop. He raised the crucifix high, sweat dripping down his face, and began the final prayers. For nearly 4 hours the battle raged. Anna screamed in voices not her own. Her body convulsed, her wrists bruised from the force of restraint. The priests shouted prayers until their throats went raw. Then suddenly it stopped. Anna froze, her eyes wide open. The silence was unbearable, not peace, but the kind that comes before a storm. Then she began to cry. Her voice, her real voice, broke through the still air. "Father," she whispered, "it's leaving." The candles reignited on their own, one by one. The heavy smell of sulfur filled the room, and a cold wind swept through, slamming the shutters open. The nuns screamed. Father Theophilus shouted the final words. "In the name of the Holy Trinity, I command you, leave her." A final scream echoed through the convent. It didn't sound human. Windows shattered and the room filled with blinding light. When it faded, Anna lay motionless, tears streaming down her face. She was free. For the first time in years, she slept without nightmares. The next morning, she ate a small piece of bread and thanked the priest. Her voice was soft, exhausted, but her eyes were clear, human again. Father Steiger, who had witnessed everything, wrote later in his journal, "I saw the power of darkness and the limits of man's faith, but I also saw a miracle. There can be no doubt. The devil exists, and so does salvation." Word of the event spread quietly through Iowa. The church refused to release details, fearing panic, but fragments of the story leaked through. Locals spoke of a woman who screamed for days, of lights flickering inside the convent, of a priest who aged 10 years in a month. In the years that followed, Anna lived a quiet life under a different name. She attended Mass again, often sitting in the back pew, never speaking about what had happened. When people asked, she simply said, "I was sick, and I got better." But those who looked into her eyes swore there was something behind them, not evil, but the memory of it. Father Theophilus died a few years later. His writings about the case were sealed by the church, though some copies survived. Scholars, journalists, and skeptics would debate the story for decades. Was it possession or psychosis? Faith or fear? Yet those who were there never doubted. The nuns who had held Anna's trembling hands, who saw her body rise in defiance of gravity, carried that memory until their last days. And in the convent's empty halls, some say that on quiet winter nights the bells still ring by themselves, not as a warning, but as a reminder. Because even in the heart of faith, darkness can find a home.
If you want to uncover more hidden files, subscribe, turn on the bell, and stay with the Midnight Archives. You've been watching the Midnight Archives. The next file unlocks soon.